Hey, good evening, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, whatever time of the day it is for you. Thank you for joining us on this edition of Tabletop. And this time around, we're not going to be discussing a theme or uh, learning something about cooking in the purest sense of, in the sense that we've talked about it in the past in conversations like I've had with Anton and with Kirtana, where we talked about food in an abstract kind of way. What I thought would be nice was to just have a little storytelling session. And the first person that came to mind when I thought about doing a storytelling session here was Saba, whose stories just captured me when she told them on the recipes group. Uh, One of them just broke me. I don't often tear up when I'm reading, uh, but that caught me. And I knew that my first storyteller had to be Saba. So, and I'm so glad that she agreed to be a storyteller here without any hesitation. I thought, because from the picture I got of her is a person who is private, who will tell a story but doesn't reveal much of else of what is happening in the here and now, that kind of thing. So I'm very glad that she agreed to come on. Thank you so much, Sarah. So say hi.
Hello, hi to everybody. I can see a couple of my friends as well. So just a big shout out to them for coming and supporting me. I am a little bit nervous because I haven't done this before. This is my first time, so obviously if I do make a mistake or I mess up, please bear with me. Haven't done this before, so yeah.
All right. So for the benefit of those joining in late, at this point, please keep muted and please keep your video off. We will have a session late, the second part of this, where we'll open it up to everyone and you have a conversation, we'll chat. At that point, you can use the chat to ask questions, or you can simply raise your hand or use the Zoom raise hands gesture if you want to be recognized, and we'll come into you. But thank you very much for making the time to join us on this, what I know is going to be a lovely evening of storytelling. So Saba, let's start by asking you first about you spent your childhood, some parts of your childhood in Kashmir. And what was it like at that time? Because for many of us, Kashmir is this distant entity. It's a part of the country we go to for holidays in peaceful times. It's houseboats, or it's militancy, or it's heartbreak and, very conflicting views on it. But you lived there. It was your life. Tell us a bit about your life there.
So I was born there. Both my parents are from there. I spent the first 10, 11 years of my life there, which was, all of 80s and early 90s. I think probably up until the age of maybe 5, 6, not much happened. I mean, it was pretty normal, which is what it's like for everybody else. It was pretty boring. And then, I suppose the interesting parts started. I remember in the I think it was the late 80s, 89, when the Kashmiri Pandits started to leave. But I mean, these are all very, very hazy memories. And I mean, I remember people just getting up and leaving, or, people, my friends, they were there one day and then the next day they weren't there. And we would ask our parents, why isn't so-and-so here? Why isn't this person here? What happened? And I remember a lot of the adults so confused about what was happening as well. I mean, my family, both my parents worked with All India Radio, so Radio Kashmir Srinagar, and we lived in a colony, which, you know, basically all the people who work there, they lived there. And when militancy started, and when the, you know, pundits were forced to leave, you just had the whole compound was taken over by the army. But it was for, so for us it was for our protection, because my parents worked for the, you know, central government, so they were employees of the central government. It was a very confusing childhood, because obviously you're a Kashmiri and you want azadi, and you know, you want independence from India, but then you're living among the army who are protecting you from the militants. So it was very, very confusing. I mean, for me it was. I'm sure it was, you know, for other people as well who lived there. But from there onwards, it was full of conflict. I don't think it wasn't normal. It wasn't normal. From there onwards, you cannot call it normal. It was, you know, it was broken. It was fractured. I don't think I actually remember a single day after that when you could just go to bed and think, okay, you know, tomorrow's going to be fine. Because obviously around early 90s, militancy was at its peak, and you had a lot of young boys who would, you know, who would get up and you know, cross the border. So that was something you dealt with as well. You know, sometimes you would have somebody within your extended family who, you know, who would get up and leave. Sometimes a friend's brother. And then obviously these boys started coming back. They started fighting. They started dying. They started getting killed. And it got really, really ugly. Obviously for everyone. Yeah, so no, not happy memories of that. But I think with everyone, it doesn't matter where you live, you do try to create, you know, some, you know, an illusion of normality. And I think that's what our parents and our aunts and uncles and our grandparents tried to do. You know, we tried to have all the, you know, the festivals, the weddings, and all of these things. I mean, yes, sometimes, you know, they took place while, you know, bullets and grenades were raining on our heads. But you know, we did it. We got through it. I got through it, and that's why I'm here today.
So it was the later years of childhood that changed must have been so awfully difficult to, I mean, the uneventful, the happy, I mean, you know, that happily uneventful early childhood, and then coming of age in a very different kind of Kashmir.
I think when you know, when we were going through it, it's, you know, when you're going through trauma, your body and your mind, they, you know, they work towards just getting you through the you know, the event. And we didn't really think about it at the time. That was our normal. That's what we had. You know, we didn't have another reality. And I think especially for you know, people who are my age, I mean, you know, how much do you remember from when you're like 5, 6? You don't really remember much. It's really, you know, once you get to 6, 7 and things start happening that, you know, you start noticing the world around you. I mean, things did change in the sense that I have this memory of being able to play outside late into the night, especially when it was like July, August, when the weather would get really hot. We would be allowed to play in the garden till 11 sometimes in the evening. I mean, I actually remember this. But then I remember there was this, all of a sudden, this time when, as soon as it started getting dark, you couldn't go outside. And you weren't allowed to have, you just weren't allowed to have an emergency, after, say, 7:38, when it got dark. Anything that needed to be done after 8, it was always, can it wait till tomorrow? It's you just couldn't go out. It was scary. And there was also this, because in Kashmir there is a very, very heavy military presence wherever you go. It's obviously you have the the military areas, but then you also have residential areas, and even in residential areas the presence is very, very noticeable. You have bunkers. So where I live, in Srinagar, literally I think like 3 doors down from us there are bunkers. And what was otherwise a very quiet childhood just turned into, you could be sleeping and then you just hear grenades or a crossfire somewhere, and you learnt that, oh, it's fine, I can just sleep through this because I can tell how far away it is from me. And that became the new normal. And yeah, it just, life changed for everybody, not just me, it changed for everyone. For young people, for the elderly. I mean, I don't know if you've heard of, they're called ID parades. So I actually remember this one incident when I think I was maybe 16 or 17 years old, and I was traveling by bus. The bus was stopped at a bunker, and all the men were asked to get off. Everybody carries an ID card in Kashmir. You have to have one. So if you're at school, you carry one from school. If you're at a workplace, you carry one from workplace. So you need something which has your name on it, which says, what you do, what you are. You cannot just walk around without an ID card because it could cost you your life. And I mean, I was a teenager at the time, and so because I was a girl, I mean, I was told that you can just stay in the bus. All the men and boys were asked to get off. There were a few other females. We stayed on. I had a small rucksack with me, and the guy, the army guy who came up, and he said, "What's in your bag?" And I had a lunchbox, a tiffin, those stainless steel ones that you get in India. And he said, "What's in it?" And there was a spoon in it, and he shook it, and I said, "It's a spoon in it," and that's why you can hear that sound. And he said, "Oh, are you sure there isn't anything else in it?" And I just remember feeling absolutely terrified. For a second I thought, what if there isn't a spoon in it? What if there is something else in it? How do I know? What if I've given it to my friends? What if my friends have done something? How do I know? So it's just all of these really impossible scenarios go through your head. And I mean, he made me open the lunchbox, and he saw that it had the remnants of my lunch and a stainless steel spoon, and that was it. But I mean, it doesn't sound like much happened, but these are small things. They chip away at your soul. It happens. I mean, in the morning you could leave in the bus and you get stopped. You get to work. They frisk you. You have to go to the bank. You get frisked. you come out, you go to another government office, and you have to be frisked. You're walking down the street, you can be stopped. If you're traveling by your car and there is a military convoy coming towards you, there will be, you better find a spot to just move out of their way, because they can be pretty brutal if you get in their way, or because they have so in the convoy, it's always best not to get in between them. They have to travel in a certain order, and I mean, obviously, also for security purposes, it's best not to get in their way. But I also remember once, by mistake, my brother did. He was driving the car and he got in. He came between the two, and he was stopped. And they asked him to show his ID card. He did, and then they slapped him. And at the time, it was like, oh, thank God they just slapped him and they didn't kill him. But it was only later that you thought about what that did to a young man. What it did to his mind, and what was he thinking, what was he feeling, to be slapped like this in front of his sister and not be able to defend himself. Or I don't know, if things had gotten out of hand, what would he have been able to do? He wouldn't have been able to do anything. I mean, what do you do in a situation like that? So yeah, I mean, it was that, and obviously there were hormones, and you read, so there was also this world which was possibilities of of things, and of a world that was so different to ours. And but you still had people falling in love, and people running away, and I mean, all of those things still happen. Life doesn't stop, not even for conflict. Which is good.
Just yesterday talking to friends about remembering at some point that I could tell how far thunder was by the difference in time between the flash of lightning and hearing the thunder. And that's a normal childhood. That's the kind of thing you teach you, not how far away does that missile fall, or how far away are those guns, or the bomb explosion. And I was thinking, your brother, for a young man to face that kind of indignity and know that you cannot stand up.
It happens a lot there.
To be identified all the time by in your homeland, in your birthplace, where you're suspicious. Yeah, that's enough. I mean, it's a very different experience, of course, for you. And for those of us who have never been there, who have only seen stuff through fiction, movies in which we would have seen film stars dancing around trees or snow, and then find this land turned in suns into a place of militancy. So I sort of want to get into your stories a bit, but I wanted to know a little bit about, was the Kashmir of your growing up times, would you have called it a very patriarchal kind of place?
So around the time that, I guess when I became aware of, my family, how the women functioned within the family, how the men functioned within the family. So I guess with my background on my mum's side, my mum has 7 sisters and 1 brother. Their mother passed away when my youngest aunt was about 6 months old. So they were brought up by their dad, my grandfather, who passed away a few years ago. And he worked incredibly hard to make sure that his daughters were educated, and that they went on to become independent women, which was, I mean, for their time, it was really unheard of. You know, it was just a time when, you know, daughters grew up and you got them married and that was it. And I don't know where, you know, where he got this idea from. But so all my aunts, I mean, one of my aunts is a doctor, 2 of them served in the police. My mum was a journalist. One of my aunts works for the administration, the youngest one. So all of them have worked, and you know that they've all been financially independent. On the other side, my dad's side, my dad had 3 sisters and 2 brothers. So obviously the brothers were educated and they did, you know. But the sisters, though they were educated in Urdu and Farsi, they were not allowed to have jobs. So the purpose of educating them wasn't for them to have jobs or to be financially independent. It was, you know, just so that they could read. And that was it. But it also had to do with the fact that from my father's side, this doesn't happen a lot in Kashmir right now, but I think at that time, the caste system did play a part. And on my dad's side, they are from what's called the Peer family, and it's I suppose it's like a higher caste. And you know, the girls were educated to a certain degree, but it wasn't, you know, so that they could be independent or anything like that. It was just the done thing, really. But I found that I mean, two of my father's sisters, the younger 2, I wasn't really close to them, and they also lived quite far away, so it was always quite difficult to get to them. But my Phuphee, the one that who I wrote about, so I spent a lot of time with her, and we also lived closer to them. So I think that the distance made it possible. I mean, it was such a contrast to see how my aunts on my mum's side functioned and how the aunts on my dad's side functioned, and it was completely different. The thing is that but both sides, even with whatever degree of independence they had, obviously one side had financial independence, so they had a little bit more of, you know, the pie, I suppose. But there are rules for women, and it doesn't matter how independent you are, and you know, they applied to both, you know, to both parties. It didn't really matter. And men always did have the last say in all matters. I mean, my aunt, my Phuphee, I think, I mean, when she was younger, I mean, I remember when she was younger, you know, the decisions she would make, she would have to then consult my uncle. But I think then as she got older, she became more confident in herself, and she did more things for herself. But I mean, even now when I see, how my aunts, when they talk to me about my husband and about how I should behave with him. So I remember when I got married, I I had I think after a few weeks, I met my aunts on my mom's side. So these are all educated women. I was taken aside, and one of my aunts said, "We don't like the way you address him." And I said, "What's wrong with the way I address him?" And they said, "You call him by his name." And I said, "Well, why shouldn't I call him by his name? What should I call him by?" And they said that you shouldn't just say Mudassir, you should say Mudassir Serb. Serb is just, in Kashmir, you know how you would say G. And I said, "Well, I don't mind calling him that as long as he calls me that as well." So it's just, it's these small things. I mean, I know, somebody might think, "Oh, it's not a huge thing," but there is this concept that women are somehow smaller, more contained than men. And I think over the years, the idea has become diluted, but it has still trickled down. It hasn't completely disappeared. But hopefully with my son's generation, it will have disappeared. But I mean, with them, it's still there. It's still there.
So parts of your growing up years, I mean, the past has been a certain amount of shuttling between Kashmir and the UK. And what was it like being in these two very different kinds of societies? What were the kinds of adjustments, or I don't know, you know what I
It
mean?
was a culture shock. I remember my first day at school here. I remember going into class and I saw all these little girls just speaking English so fluently. And I couldn't speak English properly at the time. And I just remember thinking, gosh, how do they do it? And why are they talking so fast? They sounded like little birds just tweeting. And it was so cold in this country. It was so cold because I remember we traveled, I think it was September or October. And I mean, now I think, oh, September, October is fine. But I remember at the time I traveled, it was so cold. It was hard to get used to the food, the school, everything. It was hard to get used to standing in a queue because in Kashmir you don't stand in a queue, you just push past. You had to get used to traffic, traffic rules. There were rules for traffic. You had to stop, when the light was red. And also it was so clean when I came here. Everything was just so clean. I remember asking my dad, I think it was a residential street we were on. I think it was after the first few days. I said to him, "Where are all the people?" and he said, they're in their homes. And I said, "Well, why isn't there any rubbish on the streets? How do we know that there are people here? There's no rubbish on the streets." Because I remember, in Kashmir, like you just, you ate a banana and that's it. You just throw it. Here, you eat a banana, you go and you pop it in the bin, or you put it back in your bag and you take it home with you. And people were so polite here, which was another thing. Polite, yes, but I think in Kashmir you're so used to people fawning over you, you know, especially kids. Here people were polite, but so restrained in their affections. So, you know, along with the place, even at times, people seemed cold to me. But then obviously that changed with when I made friends. And I remember in at school within I think it was the first couple of weeks, I'd made a friend, and she was a girl from Pakistan. I remember the first time I met her. Her name was Sabine, and we spoke, and she told me I'm from Pakistan. And I remember thinking, maybe I shouldn't make friends with her because she's from Pakistan, and I'm a Kashmiri. This is not going to look good. And I came home, and I told my dad, is it all right if I speak to her? She's from Pakistan. And he said, yeah, it's fine. I think it should be fine. And I was like, are you sure it's not going to get me into any trouble? And he said, yeah, it's fine. So I was quite happy that, you know, I'd made a friend and that I wouldn't get into trouble for having a friend. We had a few teachers as well who were, I had one teacher who was from Sri Lanka, which was nice because, I mean, yes, she was from Sri Lanka, but, you know, she was still somebody whom I could relate to. And we had a few other girls in our class. One, again, who was from Sri Lanka, and then we had a few girls who were from, we had one girl who was from Punjab. Well, her parents were from Punjab, but she was born here, but she could speak, you know, Hindi, Urdu. And so it was nice because sometimes she would translate things for me. And I remember I got into an argument with this girl, you know, childish argument, nothing serious. And she used the F word. And I didn't know what it meant. My English wasn't that good at the time. And I said to my friend, what did she say? And she said, "Tumhe janne ki zarurat nahi hai." And I said, no, mujhe batao. And she tried explaining it. I mean, you know, we're both quite young, you know, 11, 12-year-olds, and she's trying to explain the F word in the Urdu. She finally, you know, she managed to tell me what it was, and I was absolutely shocked that anybody could use such language. So I marched to the principal and I said, I don't know what kind of an establishment you're running here, but your students are using this kind of a language. And I remember she was amused that, you know, that I was actually shocked about something like this. But then she sort of, like, you know, she sat me down, gave me a chocolate biscuit and a cup of tea, and just said that, you know, it's fine. Sometimes girls do use language. It's not acceptable and it shouldn't be used, but, you know, sometimes it does happen.
Sort of keeping an eye on the time because I'm mindful that this is time that I am stealing away from your little one.
Yeah.
So one of the things you said to me that was unusual is that you didn't learn your cooking from your mother, but you picked it up from your dad and your aunt.
Yeah.
How did that come to be?
So first of all, if there's anybody here who knows my mom, please don't tell her I said this because she will kill me. So she doesn't know how to cook. She's never known how to cook. She's always been, I mean, you know, my aunts tell me that when she was growing up, she was one of the youngest ones. So the household chores and the cooking and everything fell to the, you know, the older girls. And they say that, you know, she always had her nose in her books. And, you know, if you ever said to her, like, you know, can you help with this? You know, she would always just say, no, why should I help you? I have to do my homework, or I have to do this, or I have to do that. So she never learned how to cook from any of her sisters. And when we were growing up, we had a lady who would do the cooking. And we also had a full-time nanny, basically, for me and my brother, because my mom was working. So she didn't actually really do anything around the house. But my father learned how to cook because, so my mom is a city girl and my dad is a village boy. And he had to move from his village to Srinagar to go to university. And he wasn't rich enough to get somebody else to cook for him or to afford, you know, bringing in food from outside. So he had to learn how to cook himself. But his sisters, you know, whenever he would go back, especially my eldest aunt, she would teach him how to make stuff, and that's how he learned how to cook. And he is really good. I mean, he's really, really good at cooking. He'll make a complete mess. I mean, after he cooks, the kitchen looks like a bomb site. And when we moved here, so both of them were working. And because they were working, so both of them were working with the BBC. So one was with Hindi service and one was with Urdu service. And the transmissions that they do take place around this time. So right now when we're talking. So they wouldn't be able to get home and cook. So what my dad used to do is he was at work, he would ring me up and he would tell me what I needed to do. Okay, do this now, you know, add the ginger, add this spice, add this spice. And that's how I learned how to cook. And obviously at the weekends when he was at home, he would teach me. I did at one point ask why they don't ask my brother. He's only a year younger to me, you know, it's not like he's, you know, tiny and wouldn't be able to pick up a pan. And my dad justifies it by saying that you just have a, you know, you have a more traditional approach to cooking. I think he just means you're a girl and you needed to know how to cook so that when you got married, you could cook for your husband. I never really asked my mum, to be honest, why, you know, she didn't really intervene in this. But, you know, in a way, I'm glad I did. And also, a lot that I learned from my aunt is just by watching her. You know, she'd be doing things and then she'd tell me how you pick green chilies. You know, she'd tell me, she'd go into her kitchen garden and she'd say, come, let's go, let's pick this. And she'd show me, like, you know, how you have to pick them, how you have to make sure it's ripe, what you have to look for, things you have to look for. And then also growing up, I remember going to the markets for food shopping with my dad. And, you know, he would take me into the butchers and say, this is how you have to, you know, get a piece of meat. This is how you pick a cut. And that's how I learned all of it, just by watching and also by being forced to do the chores. So I didn't really have a choice. But I'm glad I know how to cook. I'm glad that I can, you know, I'm glad that I can pick something up and make something edible out of it. Yeah.
Did your brother learn to cook eventually?
So my brother is one of those cooks who will occasionally make a very, you know, he'll make biryani because he thinks that's just like up there with with the, you know, cooking skills. He makes biryani. he makes burfi. He's recently learned how to make burfi. But I think there is this attitude still that cooking is a woman's work, and I think it's going to be very hard to get rid of that thought. But I'm glad I know how to cook.
So let's come to your aunt, and then we'll also listen to the stories. But so you talked about what you learned from your aunt was by observation, by being around. Which part of your life was this phase of learning from your aunt?
Well, it was pretty much from when I was born, really. I mean, I've known her all my life. I've seen her. I mean, if I wasn't at their place, she would be at ours. It was only towards the end when she was unwell, and that she really stopped traveling a lot. But I mean, she would still come. She was quite close to my father, so she would still she would still come over and stay with us. But it's just that, I mean, whenever she did decide that okay, fine, I am traveling, she would then stay a couple of weeks, which was wonderful. But it in the last years of her life, it didn't really happen. It didn't really happen that much. But I mean, I think as a child, you pick up a lot by watching what the adults are doing, more than just what they're telling you to do.
Yes.
And I find that now that I am a mother, I find myself doing so many of the things that I've actually seen my aunts, especially her. And I often wonder to myself, oh, where did I get that from? And then there's like this small memory which comes back, and it's nice because I thought there was quite a lot which which time makes you forget. I think it's just things get pushed to the back of your mind, and then they just they're buried. So I think having become a mum has, for me, it's brought up a lot of memories of being a child myself, and especially my grandfather and my aunt, because I mean, my grandfather on my mother's side also had a huge influence on me, and I mean, on all of the children in the family. So we were quite lucky that we've had quite a lot of positive influence in our lives, despite the fact that we lived in Kashmir.
Something about, I think one of the first things that grabbed me about your stories was that your aunt would smoke cigarettes at the same time. And there were memories there of my childhood, my aunt, who is probably my favorite aunt, and would do this for perhaps different reasons. She was undiagnosed bipolar at the time. It had just started to make its presence felt. She was only diagnosed a few years earlier. And in her extremely active phase is what you would call manic depression. So the manic phase, or the very active phase, she wouldn't sleep for 3 days. She would be walking around. She would smoke 2 cigarettes, or she would smoke 2 cigarettes at the same time, and light a third one while she was still smoking these. And it just brought those memories back. And that's why I looked. And I'm so glad I looked beyond that. But yeah, why did she spoke to secrets at the same time? Did she ever tell you?
So, I mean, I've mentioned this in the stories. She was a pirni, so she had a she had a very deeply spiritual side. Uh, and I think it was a way for her to exert her own agency. And it was something, I mean, even now women don't smoke, you know, men smoke, women don't smoke. Um, I mean, Kashmir right now it's
For
still a
the,
very,
for the benefit of those who may not understand the term, would you explain Pirni?
so Birni is like, you know, in India how you have like a Baba who is like a spiritual, like a guru. And you know, if you have any problems and things, you know, you can go to him and he blesses you. And sometimes they give you lotions and potions and things to burn and things to drink and things like that. Um, with with her, um, I think, I mean, I don't know if I believe in the concept, you know, of Birni, but she was aware of her position in that society. Um, so first thing, her husband was a teacher in the village, so that carried quite a lot of weight. The other thing was that both of them were upper caste; they were both educated, and that carried quite a lot of weight. And the third thing was that they were quite well off, and that also carried quite a lot of weight. Um, and a lot of people came to them for help. Sometimes it was financial, sometimes it was in the way of just help with problems. Um, and I think she became, you know, she became an outlet, especially for women, um, because there are so many things which were not acceptable for women. I mean, even now, I mean, you know, now with all the education that's available, the information that's available, you would still see so many people who don't understand things like depression. I mean, if you said to somebody, I'm depressed, if I said to somebody, I'm depressed, I mean, they would think there was something positively completely wrong with me, and not in the sense of depression. I mean, they would say, you know, you have a family, you have a roof over your head, you have money, you have a car, you have everything that you need. How can you be depressed about anything? So it's, you know, there were certain things, especially with women, because women weren't allowed to complain about a lot of things. Uh, you know, whatever was a woman's lot, she had to put up with it. And even now, you will see that there's this word which is used quite a lot in Kashmir, and I absolutely hate it. It's called sabr. It means patience. Sabr is, I think it's an Arabic way. It's an Arabic word. But even now, you will see when if you see a couple where, say, a man is, he hits his wife, you know, he hits his wife and she tolerates it, you know, she goes back to her family and after a while she comes back, you will see a lot of people saying, I miss tuta sabr, as in she has patience. But it's not said in the way that, you know, why is she tolerating? It's just said as like, the more patience you have, the more you suffer, the greater your virtue, basically. And at least now women can sometimes talk about these things, but back then it was harder. It was harder for women to talk about things. And I think she became this, she became a therapist of sorts. And a lot of her clients were women. or they were men who had problems with women. I mean, sometimes you would have a client who would say, you know, I've got a jinn, or I'm possessed, and the jinn would almost always be a woman. You know, he was always possessed by a woman jinn. And I've actually seen her do this this thing where she would rid the person of this demonic possession, and it was amazing to watch, because obviously this person really believed that they were possessed. And then, you know, once she did what she did, you know, this person would believe that they were now fine. I mean, if you think about it, if you think about her life, her surroundings, the people she grew up with, she really didn't have that much power. But, you know, she found small creative ways of, you know, sticking her finger up at the society and, you know, saying, screw you. And, you know, she did it. You know, she did it with flair, and, you know, with 2 cigarettes in her, you know, in her mouth. She also used to smoke the hookah sometimes. But then I remember that I think I think she had more money towards the, you know, as she got older. So she was able to afford cigarettes. She didn't like the, you know, the tobacco that goes into the hookah. She didn't like the stuff that would be, you know, the residual stuff that was left on her fingers, and she didn't like the smell of it. And, you know, she loved her cigarettes, and it was amazing that. But the thing is that had she been an ordinary woman, it would not have been accepted. She would not have been able to smoke. I mean, my mum's sisters, well, my mum, she wouldn't have been able to smoke. I mean, this woman was, you know, she was exempt from the normal laws that governed women. And, you know, she was aware of it, and she used it, you know, to her own advantage.
I think that's a nice time to say, can we hear a story, please?
Yes, you can. So I'm going to, these are 2 stories. I've written them very roughly, but I'm not going to read them out. I am actually just going to tell you the story. So these are both the things that have happened to me. The first story that I've written, and the reason that I do want to read, I mean, you know, tell you guys right now, is because Eid has just gone by, and this is a memory that's associated with Eid for me, because this happened on one of the Eids when we were in Kashmir. It's called Chug. Chug in Kashmiri means stampede. So there is some mention of violence and grief. So just a trigger warning, you know, for anybody who might not want to hear it. This might be the time to, you know, go and take a break. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to first read something out from the story that I've written, and then I will tell you the story. It begins something like this. It is set in a huge hall, the walls and the ceiling of which are covered in khatamband. Khatamband is it's a type of decoration, the way that homes are decorated inside. Kashmir, and it's very intricate. It takes a very long time to make the small pieces and then to put them together on the walls and the ceilings. Even in my dream, I do not fail to appreciate the artistry. It is fine and intricate, much like the arterial system of a human body. There are many people there, some more familiar than others. Everyone has a glass in their hands. But this is what bothers me. They are not beautiful glasses. They are the cheap tea glasses that you find on the roadside food stalls, the kind that have usually become tinted with the color of tea from overuse. But every glass is half filled with a reddish liquid. It can't be wine, I think, because they're all Muslims and Muslims do not consume alcohol. I see my father and my mother talking to my Urdu teacher, Mrs. Wanchu. I hope she's not complaining about my inability to memorize Urdu idioms. I see my grandfather, Daddy, talking to my brother and handing him 2 bars of chocolates. And I make a mental note that the second one must be for me, so I must remember to ask my brother for it later. I see my dead great-grandfather in his turban, reciting the only bit of poetry of his that I remember. I see my Phuphee standing in the corner, alone, smoking her 2 cigarettes, but her face looks different, more like her dead mother than her own. I see my uncles arguing, my aunts laughing, and my cousins playing. But everyone is doing all of these things and holding those glasses in their hands. And then I see myself from above, and I notice that I'm wearing the most beautiful salwar kameez that I have ever seen. It is pristine white, spotless like the first snow. It feels soft, and it has the most delicate arika on it. There are tiny flowers all over it in a translucent thread. This must be expensive, I think. I must remember to ask my mum if I can wear it for Eid. I run my hands gently down the fabric and sigh. I mustn't get it dirty, or Mum will get angry. There is a sudden sound, like a branch snapping. For a split second, everyone stops, and in slow motion they all turn to look at me. It's almost as if the tape has gotten stuck in the player. It corrects itself, and then they all go back to doing what they were doing. I look down and run my hands again over my kameez. I mustn't get it dirty, I think, the thought running through my head repeatedly. And then I see it. A tiny crimson dot near my abdomen. It starts off so tiny that I have to squint my eyes to look at it. And then it grows, like potassium permanganate on the chromatograph paper. It spreads like a circular wave. It is then I realize that I have been shot. The crimson spreads quickly, annihilating the pristine white. The small pearly flowers drown. I am dying, I think. How will Mum clean this now? I have to ask for help. Wait, I need to go to the hospital. I look up and scream. But everyone carries on. I run to my grandfather and tell him, look, I've been shot, but he just smiles and presses the bar of chocolate in my hands. I run to my parents and tell my mum that I need help. And she looks at my kameez disapprovingly and says, how will I ever get this out? I run to my Phuphee and say, you have to help me, I am hurt. She says, it's okay, I'll make you a snack later. I go back to the middle of the room and start crying, at first quietly, and then louder and louder until I am screaming. I don't want to die. I don't want to die. Somebody, help me. Help me. I feel the ground beneath me start to shake really hard, and my mum shouting, shh. Sorry, Chutik, Sashaktik. Everything is okay. You are okay. And that's when I wake up, soaked in sweat and tears. So this is the first part of the story. And this is a recurring dream that I've had for a very long time, for as long as I can remember. And this dream I started having after an event which happened a very long time ago when I was in Kashmir. Usually on Eid, the first day of Eid, we would celebrate at home. And on second day, we would often go and see our aunts, our uncles, our grandfather. On this particular Eid, we went to see my aunt, my Phuphee. And I remember my parents saying that let's not visit her today. Let's do it another day. But we made such a fuss, me and my brother. We cried, we screamed, we shouted, we threw things about. No, we want to go, until our parents caved, and finally we were bundled off into the bus, and we left. We went there. We had a wonderful time. We got loads of money, which is really what we wanted to go for. We just wanted to get gifts and money. And then when we were coming back, so once we left their place, there is a very long walk from their gate, the main gate, to where we would then get transport to come back to our place. And all of them would accompany us, to this place where we would. So it was like a bus stand and they would all of them would come, and we'd all walk, and it would just take the longest amount of time because all the adults would just be engrossed in this conversation. I mean, as kids, we just used to think, what are they talking about? And what me and my brother and my cousins would do is we would watch these adults, walking, and we would run forward, and then, we would go back, run around them, and then just repeat the whole thing until we got to the bus stand. Now, so we get to the bus stand, and we are looking for the bus that we have to take now. We're all standing around when all of a sudden you hear a bullet pierce the air. And, there is this hustle bustle, that there are all of these food stalls, people selling things. You can hear all of this. And then there is this bullet. And through it all, you can hear it. And everyone knows it's a bullet. And everyone freezes for a split second. It's something out of a movie, like a Hollywood movie that you would see. And everybody freezes, and then everybody runs, but nobody knows where it's come from. Nobody knows which direction they are supposed to run. But the only thing everyone knows is that you have to run, because that's the only way of saving yourself. So my mum grabs hold of my arm, but I remember it was a really, really hot day, and we'd had one of those orange bars that you would get. I think they used to be like 50 paise or something like that. But it was such a hot day. I remember it trickling down all my arm. And I remember when she was holding onto my hand, it was sticky, but the heat was also making it slippery. It was sticky and slippery, which is kind of weird. And she's trying to pull on my arm, she's trying to tug on my arm, she's trying to make me run in the direction. And everyone is running in this one direction, which is which goes back up towards the village. But there is a bottleneck coming up. And at the bottleneck, we get there, and there are so many people there. There are so many people. But by the time we get there, we realize that there is a group of soldiers who is coming towards us. And then I realized, oh, this is why we're running in this direction and not any other direction, because, you know, soldiers are coming towards us. And then, so what I'm going to tell you now is it happened within a few seconds. But, you know, for me, this is something that will play out in my brain again and again and again. And so slowly. So I'm at the bottleneck. I'm standing there. My dad is carrying my brother. Everyone is running. But there, everybody has to slow down because it's a bottleneck and there are too many people. There's not enough space for everybody to get in. I am standing. Behind me, there is a woman, and there is a gate behind me to somebody else's house. We have to turn left. My mom is trying to pull on my arm, but for whatever reason, I'm stuck. I can't move. And I look forward, and I see there is this group of soldiers who are coming towards me. But then there's this one soldier, this lone one. He stops moving. He kneels, and he picks up his rifle and he points it. And I can't. I remember his face, you know, through the helmet that he was wearing, and obviously he had the neck thing with it. And he points, and there is a sound, which is a bullet, and then I just feel this really, really sharp pain in my shoulder on my left side, and I stand there and I hear somebody moaning, and I think it's me, and I think I've been hit. I think I've been hit in my heart, because that's why my left shoulder is hurting so badly. And I think, okay, I'm going to die. But then it's basically my mum yanking on my shoulder, trying to pull me out of place. And the woman behind me was wearing a white perun, like a very loose gown. Because my mum pulled me out of the way, she got shot. I mean, it's possible that I might not have got shot, but I think that it's very likely that I would have. And I saw that her perun, it was white, and I saw the red. You know, I saw it appear, and the way it spread out on her dress. And after that, I didn't see anything. I must have passed out, because when we went, because we ended up going back to our aunt's, and she saw that, you know, I was in shock. She made me this. I mean, she was trying to, you know, soothe me and say, it's fine, it's all right, you're all right, nothing is the matter, everything is fine. She made me this. It's called. I mean, you've heard of kahwa, right? Yeah, but in Kashmir sometimes they do a version with milk. It's done with milk, and they also add dry fruits to it, and a few strands of saffron, and it's supposed to be very nourishing. And for me, she put extra sugar so that I would drink it, and I did drink it. And she'd also made she would make this. So she hated getting fast food, or, you know, junk food from outside, what you would call. She preferred to make it at home. There was this thing which is called basrak. It's like a Kashmiri donut, but it's a lot harder, and it's a bit chewy, as not like the American donuts. They're very soft and fluffy, aren't they? And they melt in the mouth. Not these ones, you have to really chew them. And she would always make these whenever we were going around, and she gave me this massive one, and it was she'd used beetroot to make it red, you know, the color from a beetroot. And I remember she gave me that, and you know, I forgot about it. I forgot about what had happened. Because I was concentrating on the food and how good it was, and the sugar rush, I suppose, is it's what you need, isn't it, when you're in shock. And so, you know, this Eid that's just gone by, it's reminded me. I've never made the donut at home myself. I've never made it. I've never tried. But the Eid that's just gone by, it reminded me of that, and that's why I wanted to talk about this. So this is the story. This is what happened years ago. So that was the story of Basrak and Dadgaha. You know, how to survive a stampede, or how to make Dadgaha and Basrak. Yeah.
Want to tell the other story as well right now?
So the second story is very, very disturbing. It's very painful. I've written this story a few times in the past 7 or 8 years, and I've never really found a way of I've never been happy with the way that I've told it so far. I feel like I haven't done justice to basically what happened. So this story is called The Last Mother of Kashmir. And the recipe that goes with it is one that is made in Kashmiri homes very frequently. And it's hark, which is the collard greens, but it's made with meat, mars, hark de mars. Lots of people love it. I mean, I don't know anybody who doesn't love eating it. I love eating it. But for me, this dish it's not just delicious, it's also very painful, because it reminds me of this. So the story takes place once again in my aunt's village, and in her village there was this this lady, and everybody called her Nich Mas. Nich in Kashmiri means small, Mas means masi. So if you translated it, it's like Choti Masi. And that's what everybody called her. I mean, I don't even know why people called her that. It was just a name that was given to her. She had a son, but she had lost her husband very young. I think her son was maybe a year or 2 years old when she'd lost her husband. And you know, she worked really, really hard to educate him, and he grew up to become a school teacher, and she was so immensely proud of him. She was so immensely proud of him. I don't want to tell you his name. We will just refer to him as her son for the story. I mean, her son was her whole life. He was everything. You know, there was nothing else. That's it. It was him. Everything about her life was about her son. And this was a woman who she wasn't educated. She wasn't financially well off. She worked, she had fields and things, and she worked really, really hard. And she also did, I mean, you know, at that time, it was something that was done. Now I don't think it really exists anymore, but you know, the charka, the wheel, the spinning wheel. So she used to make I don't know what it's called. I think it was you know, they would, I remember she used to get the cotton, and I remember she used to sort it out like this. And I remember her spinning the wheel and making the thread, and she would then sell that. So a very, very difficult life, which became easier than when he became a teacher and he had a salary, and you know, their lives were so much improved. And they found him a bride as well, and you know, he was going to get married. And then one not so fine day, he was killed. He was killed by the army. He was accused of being a militant. They said that he was a militant, that he was working with them, but he wasn't. And the reason that I can say that he wasn't is because in a village, or even in a town, I suppose, but especially in a village, when there was somebody who was a militant, everybody knew who it was. It wasn't a secret that you could keep from other people. So you always knew, you know, who had crossed the border, who had come back, who was doing what. So we knew it. He wasn't. He was just a school teacher. And he was picked up one day. He was killed, and they left his body was brought back, which is something huge, because so many were just picked up and they just disappeared. You never knew what happened. And so she buried him, and then, you know, we would walk past her house, or we would see her, and she would always just be sitting at the door. She would always be at the door. You could try speaking to her. She didn't really say anything. But I know that my Phuphee would, every Friday, she would make hark and Mars. She would make it, and she would take it over to her. And I remember on several occasions that when she went and then she came back, that some of it was smothered on her. And I asked her a couple of times, you know, oh, did she throw it back at you? Did she not want it? What happened? And she wouldn't tell me. She wouldn't tell me what had happened. But I noticed that every time, you know, that she would come back, and she would smell of it, and some of it you could see on her burqa, you know, you could see it on her. And then I think years from then, one day she goes, you know, it's a Friday and she's making hark and Mars. She gets up very early in the morning, you know, she picks the leaves in her own garden. She gets one of the people who help her in the garden to then go down to the butcher and get some fresh meat. She cleans everything, she gets everything ready, she makes it. And at that point, she doesn't use a pressure cooker. She never uses a pressure cooker when she makes it for them. She always uses a pressure cooker when she's cooking meat. She lets it cook for hours and hours and hours and hours until it's really, really tender. Uh, and I mean, I don't know if you've been in Kashmir, but if you don't pressure cook the meat, it's not going to be, you wouldn't be able to chew it. Basically, it's hard. I think it's something to do with the altitude. Uh, but she leaves it there to cook for hours, and it's always, and it always smells so amazing. It always just, the smell is just running through the house. You can smell it outside in the garden. But she never lets any of us have a taste. She just packs it all in a box, and she goes to me, do you want to come with me? I think she had this thing where she knew that I was so curious about the things that she did, but she'd never just tell me straight out. She'd always wait, and she'd always make me wait as well. And then it was always presented in such a way that it turned into a lesson. And I jumped at the chance when she said, do you want to come as well? Because I wanted to see what the hell's going on. So I went with her, and we went into the kitchen, and she put the dish down. And to this woman, I'm completely invisible. I mean, she doesn't even notice that I'm there. Nichmas. She doesn't even notice that I'm there. And she's cooked rice, fresh rice. She's waiting for her. She's cooked fresh rice. And apparently this is the only time she actually eats, because she doesn't cook anymore. But this is the only time that she makes rice, and she waits for her. And then, she takes a plate out. She has one plate for herself, and she prepares a plate for her son. And the whole time my aunt just sits there and watches her. And then she eats her plate. And once she's eaten her plate, she then cries. She wails, she screams, she shouts. And this happens every Friday. This is what they do every Friday. And then the grief is, she just goes completely berserk. Whatever is left in the dish, she takes it, and then she smears it on herself. And that's how some of it, because she's moving around like a frantic, crazy woman. And that's how she gets it on my aunt as well. And that's why it's on her dress as well. And this is the only way this woman knows how to express her grief. The rest of the time you see her sitting at the door, quiet. She doesn't make a sound. She doesn't acknowledge anyone. She doesn't reply to your salam. But this is the only time she comes to life, and she screams and she shouts. And I'm standing there. When I was quite young, I was absolutely terrified. I mean, I thought she was going to kill me, but she couldn't even see me. I mean, I wasn't even there. I didn't figure anywhere for her. And she kept saying all of these things in Kashmiri to my aunt. And at that time, I couldn't understand. I had seen other people lose people before. I had seen other people lose children before. But this was the first time that I had seen grief, just something that is so personal. I mean, when people pass away, we go up to people and we say, we're so sorry for your loss. And it's also polite, isn't it? It's also politely done. It's also beautifully done. And even if you have, if you have funeral services and when people are buried, everything is, it's all done so nicely. But this is the thing, though, isn't it? There is nothing polite about grief. There is nothing nice about it, and yet we want to be nice about it, because that's just how we know how to deal with it. And yet I saw this woman. I mean, she looked like a mad woman, covered in this dish, covered in rice, her hair, her face, her hands. She was, she threw it on the walls, everywhere. It was everywhere. And she kept saying all of these things. She kept shouting and screaming. And what I did for the story was I tried to put together basically what she was saying. And this is how the story ends. So she says, "To all the parents, especially the mothers of this land, I say this: do not be fooled by the fake ordinariness of this day. Your children are no longer yours. Your children are already dead. The bullets that will pierce their bodies have already been made, and the guns are ready. Your little boys will not become men. Your little girls, whom you think are safe, have already been looted and defiled. All your children died with the last breath of my son. Your parenthood disappeared with the last of my son's light. They snatched your children like thieves in the night when they snatched my beautiful boy. This land, where saffron once grew, only red poppies will cover its body now, a testament to the innumerable graves in its womb. There are no children here. There are no mothers or fathers. I was the last mother in this land. I was the last mother of Kashmir."
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. It can't have been easy. That it's hard enough to hear. Thank you for putting that out. And I do hope you tell more and more of these stories, because I think they are stories that need to be heard.
Sorry, I can hear you. Yeah.
I'm saying that these are stories that need to be heard. And I'm glad that you're telling them, and I hope you'll tell more of them. But yes, let me, partly because I can't find words right now, let me ask folks in the audience if you'd like to come in and chat. Put it in chat and then I'll find you and unmute you. There was a couple of questions, and I don't know if you still want to ask them, from Arlene and from Kit. Do tell me if you'd like to. I'm going to unmute both of you, and you can come in and ask your questions if you desire. In the meantime, what I'd also like to do is, there's a few pictures that, can I show those now?
Yeah, you can. So these are just some photos of my puppy. So I did ask for permission from her immediate family, so her husband. So this is my puppy. This is really towards the end. I mean, she was in her 50s, late 50s at this point. And this is how I remember. And this is how I remember her. This is how she always used to be dressed. I think we have a few more, don't we? So this is when she was very young. Yeah, this is from when she was very, very young. I don't really remember much of. I remember her like this, And this is with her family. And the two ladies that you see at the front are, one of them is her mother-in-law, the one in the mustard peron. And the other lady who is, she was in her 90s and she passed away last week. She was also a birni. And the lady in the black scarf is her eldest daughter. This is her with her son, when he was very young. And this is her house. It used to look a lot different, but her son has made it like this. And the small gazebo type thing that you can see on the side is where she's buried. She was very close to her grandmother, and her grandmother wanted to be buried there, but she wasn't allowed by her in-laws to be buried there because most women, as you probably know, don't have much choice in life, let alone in death. So she was taken and she was buried where her in-laws wanted her to be buried. And my aunt decided 4 days before she passed away that this is where she wanted to be buried. So she's buried there.
So yes, Kit, you had questions earlier. Would you like to ask them now?
Oh yes, hi. I had two questions actually, and feel free to answer either none or any part. The first one was whether you could say which dish you feel most proud to have learnt from your aunt, and the second one was in reaction to the way that you describe a woman reacting with dignity to very difficult circumstances and to conflict. Oops, hang on. I'll start my video. I'm in my kitchen putting away, putting things away. But you describe women maintaining dignity in the face of huge assaults to that dignity and in giving that to others in situations of conflict. And I just wondered whether you had any reflections on what women can do to try and change those dynamics in Kashmir, and any ways in which you think that women, any ways in which you think women could, it could be possible for women to do more. And I know it's a rather large and vague question, but it's just something that I've reflected on as a result of reading your amazing posts and stories. And thank you very much for giving us the truth about situations that needs to be known. So I'm going to take my video off now.
Okay, thank you. So the first part of your question, what's the dish that I've learned to make from her, which I'm quite proud of? So the one thing that I don't know if I'm proud of it, but it's something that I do love making, and it's halwa. It's suji ka halwa, because she taught me how to make it. She taught me how to toast the suji, semolina first, and how you make sure that you add enough water so that it swells up and it's cooked, but not too much so that then it gets really sticky. It has to be grainy, danedar. But it is something that I learned from her, and I absolutely love making it. And I do think I make it quite well. And the other part of your question, which, yes, you're right, it was a little bit vague. But I think the biggest thing in Kashmir that women can do for each other is support each other, because it's going to take men a long time to understand even a fraction of what a woman goes through in Kashmir. And I think the best way of making that happen a little bit faster is really supporting each other and trying to understand each other's struggles, because I think that because there are so many shared experiences for women there, I think they can learn from each other.
Arlene, would you like to comment?
Hi, Peter. Yes, thank you. Thanks for organizing this, Peter, and thank you for your beautiful story, Saba. Yeah.
Hi.
So thank you guys for organizing this, and thanks for your beautiful story, Saba. You know, just like someone else said in the chat, I mean, it's so heartbreaking that I don't think that any words would suffice to even, you know, I mean, yeah, they just wouldn't suffice. I grew up in a very different background in India. I can't even imagine, you know, I can't even begin to imagine what Kashmiris go through every day for, you know, the last few decades. And while I also want to say, though, that I have visited Kashmir several times, and I really think that of all the places in the world that I've traveled, it is the most beautiful place I have ever been to. And its people are even more beautiful than that, if that's even believable, but it's true. I had a question. I had a question regarding, you know, you mentioned something about your experience as a child, you know, your and your brother's experience as children, where, you know, you guys have experienced and also heard about and lived through, say, firings and, you know, indignity, etc. And so, you know, it was surely disturbing to you guys as kids growing up. But also to some extent, I would imagine that your extended family also, you know, experienced a lot of that. I'm specifically talking about your aunts here because I was listening into you earlier, and I remember you saying that your aunts on your mom's side, your masis, you know, two of them got into the police, one of them is with the government out there now, and I'm just wondering, they must have experienced the same that you and your, you know, your immediate family and your brother experienced while growing up, but after kind of having been educated and in some ways become part of, you know, the administration by way of being in the police or by way of working for the government, what is their take on the way Kashmir is or was governed, you know, with regards to military or, you know, like no civil rights, things like that? I'm wondering if their experience kind of built their perceptions and beliefs, or whether them kind of being in the mainstream now in some ways, if it has changed that. So yeah, that's my question. Thanks again for this and for sharing.
Thank you for attending. Coming back to your question, I think what you have to understand about Kashmir is so, I mean, I will talk specifically about my aunts. When they work, so two of my aunts worked for what was the women's branch of Kashmir police. I mean, they saw it as it was a job that they did, which gave them financial independence. It wasn't a political statement that they were making. They did not see themselves as working for mainstream. They did not see themselves as somehow aligning themselves with India or the Indian state. If my aunt works for the, I mean, she was, I mean, my aunt was with the state government, but with the abrogation of Article 370, there is no state government anymore. I mean, it's a union territory now. A lot of Kashmiris work for the government, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they align themselves with what the government believes or how the government operates or what their agenda is. You can completely work for an organization and, you know, still believe that, I mean, you know, whatever you want to believe in. I mean, it's, for them, it's a job. It's a way of financial independence. That's what it is. It's as simple as that. I know that this narrative is, and I'm not talking about you in particular, Ali, when I say this, but I know that this narrative is peddled out there, that if you somehow, as a Kashmiri, that, you know, even if you go outside Kashmir or you work in Delhi or if you work in other parts of India, somehow you apparently somehow it means that you no longer want what, you know, other Kashmiris want, but that's not the case. I think if you speak to a lot of Kashmiris, you will realize that many of them want the same things, and there are also a majority out there who don't want the same things. You just have to, I think it's just important to listen to people. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you, Saba.
Anyone else with questions? I mean, I do have questions I could ask, but I did promise I would make space for folks in the audience who've been patiently waiting through this. And because so many people were able to stay through, though we have gone far beyond the time that I thought this might go on. A few people left me private messages saying they had to get back to other things. But thank you, Saba, for the stories. But they apologized for not being able to stay until the end. I need to check with you before I ask people for more questions. Can we go on for a little while? Because this is beyond the time that I asked you for.
No, it's fine. I still have a little bit more time, so I'm happy to carry on for a little while.
Yeah, I'm very conscious that you have a little one who does need your time.
My husband is looking after him right now.
Okay, so yeah, folks, please put the message in chat if you want to ask a question or use the Zoom raise hands gesture. I'm just going to comment on this, something on that stories, and it occurred to me that I have no idea what a rifle shot sounds like. I have not ever having to learn that.
I think you're going to have to Google it.
Yeah. No, I mean, the privilege that I sit on is that I never have to hear that sound.
The weird thing is that, I mean, you know, I've lived here for quite a while now, and I remember initially when we moved here, and you know, here you have around the time when you have Halloween. There's a lot of bonfires.
Your husband says in chat, he is listening.
He's talking about my son, yeah. He's saying that he's listening. So that's good. I mean, even here, I remember that initially when I would hear the fireworks go off, you know, my first reaction was, oh, you know, where is the grenade attack, or where's the crossfire? What's happening? And then I had to remind myself, no, you're not there. You know, you're in London and it's fine. But I know that it happens to a lot of people. I think somebody asked, Yamini asked just a quick question. Will the new state of Kashmir change the life of Kashmiris? I think it's a tricky question, because so Kashmir has gone from being a state to a union territory. Does it change the everyday life? The fact that many Kashmiris want freedom? No, it doesn't. But if you see the things that are happening internally, I suppose when they had a state government, on the everyday lives that were there was a lot more control that the state government had. But now there is no control. There are things happening in Kashmir where people, if they've spoken against the government and they have government jobs, they are losing their jobs. And this is being done under under one of those acts where you can just fire people and they can't really ask questions. I'm sure it doesn't really exist anywhere else in India. It's in Kashmir. So, think about other parts of India. Where do you have a complete communication blockade, for weeks on end? Where can you have it? Where does it happen? Have you had it anywhere in India? Have you heard of it anywhere in India? So, things have got worse for Kashmiris in one sense. But there are other ways where things haven't really changed. So I guess if things aren't getting better, then I guess it's all the same, isn't it? But the present government has found new and creative ways of making life difficult. That's the nicest way I can put it.
Extremely diplomatic.
Thank you so much, Saba. You hear so many things, but today what you...
I think, Yamini, you got cut off.
Carry on, Yamini. You seem to have muted yourself, Yamini. You're on mute.
Switch my video on. Hold on, I'll change it a little.
Yeah, you're audible now.
Saba, your जैसे हम हिंदी में बोलते हैं कि रूह हिला दिया, नहीं रूह कांप उठ गई. I've heard from my cousins and my uncle who was in Jammu for many years in the Science Institute there, stories. I've heard from my cousins who are from the army also. But the way they said it and what you said today has given me a totally different picture. And I thought maybe the situation would improve with the new status coming in. But from what you have seen and from what you have said, I don't think that's happening. All
I don't think the situation in Kashmir is going to improve. I think
that's what, and
it's not going to change.
It's sad because from the little that I have seen of Kashmir, I've gone to Vaishno Devi, so I've not seen much of it. I've just seen more of Jammu part of it than the Kashmir part of it. But my husband has gone to Kashmir and he says it's so beautiful. The people are so nice. So that's why
but apparently,
This is
apparently, I mean, there is this thing, you know, where they say that they want Kashmir, but they don't want Kashmiris. So I think that's how it is. And you mentioned the stories that, you know, your friends and relatives have told you, and but you know, my stories that you've had, and you're saying that they're so different. By all means, you know, when they are telling you their stories, you should believe them. And when I am telling you
No,
my
I didn't
story,
say I didn't
you
believe
should
them.
believe
I
me.
didn't say I didn't
Yamini,
believe
just
them.
Yamini, just hang on for a second. Let her answer. Thank you.
What I'm trying to say is that I told you a story about what happened on Eid. I don't know how many people there were that day, and if you were to able, you know, if you were somehow able to get all of those people together in a room and you interviewed them, and you know, they told you the story, each person would tell you a different version of that story. And you know, even the guy who, you know, who had the gun and who shot that bullet, he would tell you a different story as well. And none of our stories will match, and yet none of our stories are any less important. And I mean, when I say this, there is a huge army presence in Kashmir. For every 7 people, there is हर 7 लोगों के लिए एक आर्मी जवान है कश्मीर में. I mean, it's mind-boggling, you know, for every 7 people. And yet, for that whole population, there are like 100 ventilators only right now. There are only 100 ventilators in all of Kashmir right now for the population, and yet there are more. So it's hard for people in Kashmir. It's not the same hard it is in Delhi or Uttar Pradesh or Madhya Pradesh. It's not the same hard. It's a different kind of strife. There is, if you have, you know, people work hard to earn a living, it's not the same in Kashmir. They don't just work hard to earn a living. They work hard to earn a living, and then they work hard to stay alive. And then they face, you know, indignities at every step, every single step. And then you have, you know, people who say to you that, you know, we love Kashmiris, we've been to Kashmir, and I'm not saying that it's not the truth, that it's not genuine, but it's so hard to believe any of that because we don't see that. What we see is, you know, we see guns pointed at us. We see army boots, military boots. We see women molested, raped. That's what we see. I mean, you are telling me this right now, but I'm seeing this right now. I mean, if that makes sense, you know, it's not something I've seen while I was a little kid. So it's important. I mean, yes, it's important for me to tell my stories, but it's also important for you to try and reach out to people out there.
But the stories we hear,
Thank you.
is who has
Thank you so
permission
much.
to tell the stories, whose stories get heard, who has the right to speak for someone. And very often, you have a lot of people speaking for Kashmiris, but not enough people pass the microphone. There's that too as well. right?
Yeah, yeah.
And this also segues into what Poonam is asking, and it's something that I wanted to ask as well. You have written these stories and others. Is there a book, perhaps? Because I would like to know. I know that I have told a couple of publishers, pointed them at your ID and said you need to grab this woman.
Thank you so much. I am writing them at a snail's pace, simply because I do not have the time to sit down for hours and hours, and to just write them down all at once. And sometimes, so most of the time, I don't have time. But when I do have time, the inspiration is not there. And if sometimes when I do have the inspiration, I am also lazy. I'm sorry, but that had to be said.
Of course. Subi says, can we be your cheerleaders, cheering you on to keep writing? And I think maybe babysitter would be better.
Yes, of course you can. We all need cheerleaders. Even if you haven't been through a difficult time, you still need cheerleaders, don't you? So feel free to cheer.
Someone says we want to.
Oh, he wants a lot of things. Doesn't mean he's going to get them.
How old is your little boy?
He's 17 months today.
Right.
He's 17 months old today, and he runs about the place, and he runs about the place, he runs the place. Everything happens, on his say-so. So he's quite he's enjoying. Firdaus has written that I am in tears, having flashbacks of the very little I have seen, and it still hurts. Yeah, I know what it feels like.
Yeah, but I do know that if you do write that book, it will be a valuable voice. And you have a lot.
There are some really really good books out there that you can read. There's a new book out by a woman, a lady called Farah Bashir. It's called Rumors of Spring. It's about what it was like for her as a girl to grow up in Kashmir. It's a memoir. There are 2 books by an author called Mirza Waheed. One is called Collaborator, which is one of my favorite books. And there's another one called, I forgot what the other one is. You might have to look it up. And there's one by my mother. It's called Lost in Terror. It's been published by Penguin. It came out a few years ago. But she shares the same surname as me, and her first name is Naima. But if you are interested, I mean, I can post about these in the group, or I can send you a list. There's also one by one of the earliest ones. It's called Curfewed Night by Basharat Peer, which is it's quite a good book. It's a first-hand account. And there are some non-fiction ones as well. There's a collection of essays called A Desolation, called Peace. Mm-hmm. It's been edited by somebody I know. Her name is Atarzia. She's a professor in America, and there's another one by her as well, which it's mainly around women and resistance. So there are some really really good books out there, and I think it's you don't always have to just read one book and then form your opinion. You can read a lot of books, and you can still suspend judgment after that. You don't have to, it doesn't have to be this or that, basically. That's what I'm saying. I know it's not an easy position to take sometimes. So.
Subi, you had a very important point to make. Do you want to unmute yourself and say that?
Happy to, but it's not a question really.
Yeah, it's a very important point you're making. So I thought that is something on why Saba should write the book.
Yeah, no, hi Saba.
Hi.
What is really beautiful and important really about your stories is the way what I've written is the way you foreground women's labor and their art and skill as their resistance. I'm taking a word that you just used. And that becomes really, so one has read a lot on Kashmir, but this particular voice is what is missing. And there is a lot of description of women and what they have suffered and the resistance, but there's a way in which you are articulating it that really is just poetry and poetry that really rips through your heart in a way that it needs to. We all really need to listen. That's all.
Thank you. I think with I think especially, I mean, with Kashmir, you know, in the context of Kashmir, it is still a very patriarchal society. There are no doubts about that. But with the conflict, there are roles that women have had to take, which they might have had to take a longer route, you know, to take. So you've seen women now become activists, which they might not have had a chance. I don't know if you've heard of a lady called Parveena Ahangar. She's called the Iron Lady of Kashmir. And I mean, if you're in Kashmir, she's somebody you would call, she's a very typical Kashmiri lady. And, you know, if you speak to her, if you meet her, I mean, she doesn't look like what an activist should look like, basically. She looks like a very ordinary Kashmiri woman. And her son was taken, and she's never seen her son after that. She doesn't know whether he's alive or whether he's dead. And she formed an organization for the, you know, enforced disappearances. Yeah. And I think what she does is there's a park in Kashmir called Iqbal Park, not Iqbal Park, I think it's called Ratab Park in Lal Chowk, and I think every week she goes there and she sits and, you know, she holds up a banner. That's all she does, you know, but she became an activist because of that. There are women who lost husbands, and the only way of them, you know, having to support the rest of the family then was to go out and work, and they wouldn't have done that otherwise. So you know, while there are so many roles that they've had to take on which have been thrust upon them, and they've had to do it because they have no choice. But in a way, it's also helped them to break out of their shell, I think. So that, you know, they've had to find a way of resisting. You would also see, I mean, I don't know if this is something that and this is something I have personal experience of. When there is a, you know, especially when, say, for example, something has happened, a militant has been killed in an area, or say somebody is hiding out somewhere and the army is looking for somebody, it's quite dangerous for men to travel around. And often what men will do is a woman will come along with them from the family. And I've actually done this with one of my cousins years ago, and, you know, something like this had happened, and there was a lot of military presence, and they were checking everyone. ID cards were checked, bags were checked, whether you were in the bus or private transport, you know, you were stopped. But somehow having a woman with you, having a female with you, it softened, you know, everything. And women know this, and, you know, they would they would do it. I mean, I did it for my cousin. You know, I went along with him so that he would be, I guess, not killed. So these are things that I guess you don't think about, you know, at the time when you're doing them, but these are things that I think every woman has probably done. And women have been, if you know somebody was taken by the army, they were being questioned or otherwise other things that you're not allowed to say on public platforms. You know, you would have a group of women go and stand outside this facility, and you know, they would ask that, you know, please, can we see them? You know, is he all right? Can we bring him some food? Can we bring him some clothes? Can we see him? Because men couldn't really do that. I mean, men could, a group of men couldn't go and stand outside a police station or an army bunker because they would be shot. Whereas being a female in that situation protected you, but you were also vulnerable in other ways.
Thank you, Saba. This is really very moving.
Thank you for listening.
Survey is an old friend of mine from back in college days and a filmmaker, among other things. Anyone else questions? Yes, we will ask Saba to post the list of books in the event page and share it with you.
I will do that.
Because that would be interesting to have that further reading to be recommended. And of course, this doesn't let you off the hook. We are looking for your book. You know,
you'll have to wait.
No pressure, but you know.
Yeah, no pressure.
There are a number of people here who are happy to pre-order. Yeah. As Vidya Mani says, women using food as a source of power, food as a tool of revenge, food as a way out of the oppression of their lives. What a powerful book that would make. Please do write it.
I will try my very best.
Promises. But yeah, we're going to hold you to that one. Okay, we are at, goodness me, well over 2 hours. So I think I'm going to stop demanding more and more of your time here. But
excuse me, Peter, just 1 second, please.
Please, for those.
I'm so sorry to interrupt. I mean, I have no question, but I just want to say something to Saba that both of us being Kashmiris, we've never met, but I'm so glad that we met over this Facebook page. And it's like, you know, she's a lost soul sister. I've come quite close to her. And after listening to her today, it's like, I'm really, really glad that, you know, I met her through. And I just can't wait to meet her in person. I hope you're listening to this, Saba. And it's like I'm in tears. I can relate to every word that you said, and everything has come back as a flashback. Although I haven't lived in Kashmir for too long, I was outside, but the few years that I stayed there and what we went through, so everything came back as a flashback, and I'm like, you know, I'm literally shivering with that fear.
So first of all, hugs, because I think you need them.
Yeah.
Socially distanced, of course. And second of all, I still hate you because you cook so much amazing food. And it just, I really want to eat it. So, you know, I will still give you a mush next time you don't cook it. And I love your recipes. I love that you have this ability to create. I love how she writes in the group, oh, you know, I'm just going to put these few things in the pressure cooker and then, you know, just whistle, add a bit of this and a bit of that, and that's it. You know, it's ready, just serve. No, it's not like that for other people. Other people have to plan a little bit and, you know, people have to chop vegetables. But yeah, I mean, I do understand when you say Flashbacks. I know exactly what you mean.
Yes, goosebumps. But
Yeah.
looking forward to your book, hopefully someday. And hopefully we will meet before that, inshallah.
Inshallah, we will. We will.
Inshallah. So thank
And
you.
yeah, I'm just saying that miraculously, a large number of people who signed on showed up. We had 54 people earlier, and that's something I'm very unused to on Zoom, because people sign up and don't show. So I think that's all because of who's our storyteller today. Because the other common factor is me, and I get a 10%. So I think it's just about you. And even though we've gone now 45 minutes beyond the time that we said we would do, like an hour and a half, there are still 28 people in the room. And again, that's a testament to the power of your stories and the way that you tell them. So thank you, Saba, for just making the time for this one, for telling these stories that were hard to hear, hard to read when I have read them, hard enough to hear, hard enough to read. And you just tear your soul open and tell them. So thank you for doing that. Thank you for sharing these stories with us. You write very well. No one was kidding when they said that they would be waiting to buy your book. I do hope you write it. I do understand that writing a book is a project that is huge and perhaps not for everyone. And it may be that your way of storytelling is to tell your stories in the time and the bits that you can. You make a video now and then, you put a text down with a recipe. These are all ways of story. The book is one way of telling a story, and it need not be the only way. So I'm glad that we have met you, not because we have read a book of yours, but because you came and shared recipes and shared stories. We hope you will continue to do that. It's been lovely. Thank you very much for this evening. Thank you so much. Thank you to your husband and your little boy as well for lending you to us. Thank you very much, everyone. And thank you, everyone, for joining in. Would you like to close, Saba?
I would. I'd just like to say thank you to everybody who took the time out to come and listen to me yap on today. Thank you for organizing this. Thank you for the group. It was a lifesaver. Yeah, I mean, just everybody keep writing and keep sharing your stories. I think the group became more about the stories that are associated with the recipes than the recipes themselves. And I've read some really, really amazing stories there. I mean, stories, they move you. They really do touch a part of you, which I think in a way that, if you just maybe, I don't know, if you just opened a book and tried to read it, it's different this way. It's all happening in real time. It almost feels like it's happening in real time, as opposed to just, okay, I'll just sit down with my book and read it. Yeah, so it's been an amazing experience being in the group. But I will let you guys go, and I will go as well because my son is waiting. But thank you, Peter, once again for this opportunity. All right, you take care.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you for your time.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye, Saba.